South of the last interstate exit, past the point where the road signs stop naming towns and start naming water, the continent begins to dissolve. Here, land and sea have never finished their negotiation. A place exists where the ground itself seems undecided, soft, seeping, half-drowned. Where cypress trees stand waist-deep in black water, like sentinels who have forgotten what they were guarding. Spanish moss hangs from every branch in long grey curtains, swaying without wind, filtering sunlight into something dimmer, older, more patient than daylight anywhere else. This is a world stitched together from bayous and channels, oxbows and marsh, where the maps drawn 100 years ago are already wrong, because the water is still redrawing them. It is wild in the way a flood is wild, sudden, total, indifferent, and gentle in the way of a slow afternoon on a porch, where the loudest sound is a cicada winding down. Wild and gentle exist here in the same breath, the same hour, sometimes the same person. But its true character lies not just in the water that shapes it, but in the people who have learned to live inside that contradiction. Theirs is a culture built on paradox, isolated by geography, yet fiercely connected by blood and memory. Forgotten by the nation's main roads, yet central to its music, its food, its imagination. This is a story not of a swamp being reclaimed by nature, but of a people who never left it in the first place. This is the story of the Louisiana Bayou, the story of a world that refused to dry out, and the families who built a home on water instead of waiting for solid ground. Before we dive in, comment your country or city below. I'd love to know where you're watching from. Before drainage canals and levees carved their compromises into the marsh. This land belonged to water in every season. Rain does not fall here so much as arrive, sheeting sideways off the Gulf, turning dirt roads into their own tributaries within minutes. Humidity presses down like a hand on the chest, thick enough to taste, thick enough that afternoons slow to something closer to underwater motion. Hurricanes come almost as scheduled visitors, remembered by name: Betsy, Katrina, Ida, each one leaving behind a new coastline, a new story, a new reason to rebuild. This relationship with water and weather has shaped a particular temperament, patient but not passive, watchful of the sky the way sailors are watchful of the sea, resigned to loss but stubborn about return. People here read barometric pressure the way others read headlines. They keep boats the way other households keep cars, not for leisure, but because water is simply the other road, the one that never closes for construction, though it does, on occasion, close for everything else. The temperament that emerges is unhurried on the surface and iron underneath, shaped by a landscape that offers abundance and threat in the same tide. Along these bayous, towns rarely reach 5 figures in population, and many hold only a few hundred souls scattered across stilted houses and fishing camps. In places like these, anonymity is not an option. A stranger is noticed before they've finished parking. Everyone here is bound by an intricate web of memory. Who married whom? Whose grandfather trapped this stretch of marsh? Whose boat that is tied up at the dock even when the owner is nowhere in sight? This intimacy carries its own etiquette. A wave from a passing truck is not politeness, it is acknowledgement. a small ritual confirming that both parties belong to the same map of relationships. Children are watched over collectively, disciplined by neighbors as readily as by parents, praised by name at the boucherie or the church supper before their own family hears the news. To live at this scale is to live without the comfort of disappearing. It is also to live without the loneliness of not being known. Before the heat fully arrives, the small stores and bait shops along the bayou open their doors, and with them opens the daily choreography of greeting. A bowed-in link bought before sunrise, a foam cup of chicory coffee poured without needing to ask, a nod exchanged at the fuel dock. These are not transactions so much as confirmations that the day and the community within it has begun correctly. Fishermen idle their boats at the landing, comparing yesterday's catch, trading warnings about a shifting sandbar or a good price on crawfish. Old men gather on upturned buckets outside the general store, debating little of consequence and everything of importance: weather, kin, the price of shrimp. Here, commerce and companionship are inseparable. Buying gas or bread is also an occasion to ask after someone's mother, someone's boat repair, someone's absence from mass. The ritual repeats itself daily, unremarkable and essential, the quiet infrastructure that holds a scattered community together. Family is the load-bearing wall of life along the bayou. Multiple generations often live within sight of one another. A grandmother's house at the end of the dock, a son's trailer beside the trees, a daughter's home just across the water. Sunday dinners can stretch to 20 places at the table. Cousins folded in as easily as siblings, second and third cousins claimed with the same warmth as immediate kin. Inheritance here is rarely about property alone. A trapping line, a recipe for tooth, a favorite fishing hole, a family's particular way of telling a ghost story, these pass down as surely as land does, sometimes more so. To ask, "Whose people are you?" is not small talk, it is the first and most important question asked of any newcomer. Because family here is not simply personal history, it is the entire architecture on which trust, help, and belonging are built. The boucherie and the gathering of hands among the most enduring collective traditions is the boucherie, the community hog butchering, once essential for surviving winter, now kept alive as much for fellowship as for meat. Neighbors gather before dawn, sharing labor that no single family could manage alone, scolding, scraping, rendering, grinding, stuffing sausage into casings by hand. Nothing goes to waste. Cracklins fried in iron pots, boudin seasoned with rice and liver, backbone stew simmering over an open fire by midday. The boucherie is less about the hog than about the hands doing the work together. Children learning to stuff casings alongside grandmothers who have done it 60 years running. Men swapping stories over the boiling pot, women managing the kitchen with practiced authority. It is mutual aid disguised as celebration, a living rehearsal of the community's oldest lesson. Survival here has never been a solitary undertaking. If the boucherie is where the work of community happens, the dance hall is where its joy happens. Known locally as the Fais Doudou, these gatherings, sometimes in a repurposed barn, sometimes in a roadside hall with a tin roof, are where courtship, friendship, and grief all find their outlet on the same dance floor. An accordion wheezes into a two-step, a fiddle answers, and within minutes, strangers and cousins alike are moving in the same unhurried rhythm. This is the true third place, not quite home, not quite work, but the space where the community actually happens. where news is exchanged between dances, where a young man asks a young woman's father for permission between songs, where widows are gently pulled onto the floor by neighbors who refuse to let grief harden into isolation. The dance hall does not just host community. In a very real sense, it manufactures it week after week, generation after generation. Language here carries history in every syllable. Cajun French, a dialect shaped by exile and adaptation, still threads through conversation, in phrases tossed between elders, in songs whose words have outlived fluent speakers, in nicknames that never translate cleanly into English. Storytelling thrives alongside it. Tales of the loup garou stalking the swamp at night, ghost lights over the marsh, tricksters and saints tangled together in narratives passed down at kitchen tables rather than written on any page. Music carries what language sometimes cannot. Zydeco's syncopated rhythms, born from a blending of French, Creole, and African traditions, still spill out of dance halls and church fairs alike. Craft, too, becomes a carrier of memory. Palmetto baskets woven the way great-grandmothers wove them, cast nets knotted by hand, wooden pirogues built without a single power tool. Each object a small archive of a way of life that refuses to be only spoken about, insisting instead on being made. Pride here is quiet, but it runs deep, rooted in a history of hardship worn lightly rather than dwelt upon. Ancestors were exiled from Acadia in the 18th century, scattered across an ocean, and rebuilt an entire culture from almost nothing in an unfamiliar swamp. Floods have taken homes more than once in living memory. The oil bust of the 1980s hollowed out entire towns overnight, and hurricanes have erased whole communities from the map only to watch them rebuild. Slightly smaller, slightly further inland, but rebuilt all the same. These hardships are mentioned here matter-of-factly, almost with a shrug, folded into conversation the way one might mention weather. There is no dwelling on suffering, no performance of victimhood, only a steady, understated confidence that comes from having survived what should have ended a lesser culture, and having kept dancing anyway. Racing the water itself, communal identity here often finds its clearest expression in competition on the water. Pirogue races, narrow wooden boats paddled with quick, precise strokes, draw entire towns to the bayou's edge, cheering as much for neighbors as for winners. Crawfish boils sometimes double as informal contests, families comparing spice blends and boil times with the seriousness of a championship. Frog gigging outings, alligator calling contests, and boudin cook-offs round out a calendar built less around organized sport than around shared, improvised tests of skill, passed down through generations of hands that know the water and the woods better than any rulebook could teach. These events matter less for who wins than for the fact that everyone shows up, that the whole community pauses its week to watch, wager small bets, and holler encouragement from the bank. The traditional economy of the bayou has always been extracted directly from its landscape. Shrimping fleets set out before light, nets trailing behind wooden trawlers built by hand in family boatyards. Crawfish farming turns flooded rice fields into a second harvest each spring. Mudbugs pulled from submerged traps by the thousands, trapping once sustained entire families through winter, muskrat, nutria and mink pelts sold at seasonal markets, while Spanish moss, once gathered and cured for stuffing mattresses and furniture, gave even the trees themselves an economic purpose. Oystering built entire communities along brackish inlets, generations of the same families tonguing the same reefs their grandparents worked. This was never an economy of abundance without labor. It demanded intimate, inherited knowledge of tides, seasons, and terrain. Knowledge that cannot be taught quickly, only absorbed slowly, over years spent on the water rather than in a classroom. Did not arrive in the bayou as a gentle blending. It arrived as surrounding pressure. Petrochemical plants and refineries now rise along the same waterways where trappers once worked. Their flare stacks visible from front porches, their pipelines cut straight through marsh that used to buffer storms. Highways on stilts now cross terrain that once required a boat. And offshore oil platforms blink on the horizon like a second industrial constellation. And yet the bayou holds much of modern life at a deliberate distance, even as it surrounds them on every side. Families still speak Cajun French at supper, even as satellite television plays in the next room. Traditional boat building continues in backyard sheds a short drive from refinery gates. This is not resistance out of ignorance of the modern world. It is resistance chosen deliberately, a way of living in plain sight of industry and interstate alike, while keeping certain rooms of life closed to them. What simmers on the stove food here is both memory and daily necessity, often prepared in the same iron pot for 3 generations. Modernity, gumbo anchors nearly every gathering, a dark roux built slowly over an hour, filled with andouille sausage, okra, and whatever the water has provided that week, served over rice with a ritual precision that varies from house to house but is always taken seriously. Boudin, rice and pork stuffed into casing, is eaten standing at gas station counters as often as at holiday tables, a comfort food that belongs equally to the everyday and the ceremonial. Coffee, dark and often cut with chicory, marks the start and punctuation of every day, poured before dawn and again after supper. Crawfish boils in spring turn entire yards into communal kitchens, newspaper-covered tables piled high with shellfish, corn, and potatoes, steam rising into humid evening air. Modern life has added its conveniences, pre-packaged boudin in supermarket coolers, gumbo bases sold in jars, but the ritual itself, the gathering around shared pots, remains stubbornly, deliberately unautomated. To move through this landscape on foot or by boat is to enter something that behaves less like scenery and more like a living organism. Cypress knees rise from the water like knuckles breaking the surface, and duckweed carpets still channels in a green so complete it looks almost solid enough to walk across. Herons stand motionless at the water's edge before unfolding into flight with a suddenness that startles even those who have seen it 100 times. Alligators drift, nearly invisible, their eyes breaking the surface like 2 dark stones. The air itself has weight, thick with the smell of decaying leaves, brackish water, and blooming swamp iris. Sound carries strangely here, frogs and insects rising into a chorus so dense it becomes its own kind of silence, punctuated by the distant thrum of an outboard motor or the crack of a branch under some unseen weight. To walk or paddle through this world is to feel watched by it, gently, constantly, by creatures far more suited to its rhythms than any visitor could ever be. Infrastructure along the bayou tells its own quiet story of negotiation between old and new. Elevated highways now stretch for miles above open marsh, engineering feats that let cars pass over terrain no road could otherwise cross. Yet just beneath these highways, pirogues and flat-bottomed skiffs still glide through the same channels they always have. Engines when needed, paddles when not, for trips that a bridge simply cannot make. Houseboats and camps built on stilts dot the water's edge, some connected to power lines, others still running on generators and rainwater cisterns. Where levees hold back rising water in one place, they simply redirect its force to another, a trade-off residents discuss with the resigned expertise of people who have watched engineers make the same calculations and the same compromises for decades. Old and new infrastructure exist here not in sequence but side by side, each solving a different half of the same relentless problem. Beneath all of this, the refineries and the trapping lines, the highways and the pirogues, the satellite dishes and the Cajun French drifting through kitchens, runs a single steady thread. Tradition here has not simply survived modern life, it has learned to stand alongside it, refusing to be erased even as the world presses closer every year. This is a culture that absorbs change without dissolving into it, choosing carefully which parts of the modern world to let in and which to hold, gently but firmly, at arm's length. Children here are often taught to paddle before they can properly swim, handed a cane pole before a smartphone. Taught to read a coming storm in the color of the sky, the way other children learn to read a clock. Rites of passage often involve the water directly, a first solo boat trip, a first alligator caught and released, a first boucherie attended not as a child underfoot, but as a hand doing real work. School exposes them to a wider world of ambition, universities in Baton Rouge or New Orleans, careers in Houston or beyond, and many leave, drawn by opportunity the bayou itself cannot always provide. But an unusually large number return, pulled back by something harder to name than economics. A dock that only feels right under their own boots, a grandmother's gumbo no restaurant can replicate, a language spoken nowhere else quite the same way. The pull of home here competes with the pull of the wider world, and often, quietly, wins. Labor by daylight, music by dark days along the bayou are structured around labor that does not wait for convenience. Nets must be checked at dawn, traps run before the heat becomes unbearable, boats repaired before the next storm arrives. Mornings move with purpose. There is little idle time before noon. But evenings shift entirely. Porch lights flicker on. Screen doors slap shut behind children called in for supper, and conversation slows to match the settling dark. An accordion might drift faintly from someone's yard. Fireflies rising over the grass like sparks that never quite go out, and the day's labor folds gently into rest. Music and the low murmur of adults talking on porches long after children have been sent to bed. This rhythm, duty by day, warmth by night, repeats with a reliability that feels less like routine and more like ceremony. The water rising, the land retreating, yet the bayou faces pressures that no amount of tradition can fully hold back. Coastal erosion swallows a football field's worth of Louisiana wetland at a pace that has alarmed scientists for decades. Canals cut for oil and gas access, accelerating the loss with every passing storm. Saltwater intrusion creeps further inland each year, killing cypress stands that had stood for centuries, turning once lush marsh into open water on the map. Hurricanes arrive with growing intensity, and each one costs more than the last to rebuild from. Younger generations face genuine economic pressure to relocate, and the population in some of these communities has thinned noticeably over the past several decades. These are not distant, abstract threats. They are visible from the porch, measured in the disappearing tree line at the edge of the yard, the encroaching water where solid ground used to be. Rebuilding, because that is what is done, and still, the bayou endures, not through denial of these pressures, but through a stubborn, practiced resilience. Marsh restoration projects, some led by the same families who have fished these waters for generations, work to rebuild land using dredged sediment and replanted grasses. Cultural preservation efforts